Deadpool. This version of Wade Wilson was introduced in Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe back in 2012. In this universe, Earth 12101, Wade undergoes the usual horrors: cancer, the Weapon X experiment, and constant psychological torment. But everything changes when he's captured by Psycho Man, who attempts to brainwash him into becoming a more obedient assassin by tampering with his mind and suppressing his inner voices. And instead of breaking him down, this accidentally awakens a new level of self-awareness and clarity in Deadpool. For the first time, Wade sees through everything: the lies, the cliches, and the endless suffering of being a comic book character. And that realization drives him insane. He no longer sees the Marvel Universe as a world of heroes and villains, but as a cruel, repetitive machine, one that forces people like him to suffer for the entertainment of an unseen audience. And this is when Wade Wilson becomes Deadpool. He goes on a systematic massacre of the entire Marvel Universe, and not even cosmic beings are safe. He kills the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor, The Watcher, and he doesn't stop there. He breaks into other realities, slaughters alternate versions of heroes, and eventually turns his sights on the writers and readers of the comic itself. Deadpool becomes a meta-level threat, believing that the only way to find peace is to erase all of fiction. He still jokes, still smirks, but now those quips come with a dead stare and a blade to the throat. Where Wade Wilson clings to humor and chaos to survive his trauma, Deadpool embraces the darkness. And in later stories like Deadpool Kills Deadpool, Deadpool becomes the leader of a deadly army of evil Deadpools from across the multiverse, all bent on annihilation. And it takes the combined effort of heroic Deadpool variants to finally stop him. Barely. The Void. It's the dark alter ego of Robert Reynolds, better known as the Sentry, one of Marvel's most powerful and tragic characters. The Sentry is a radiant force of good with the power of a million exploding suns, and the Void is his mirror image, a monstrous malevolent entity born from fear, trauma, and mental instability. The Void doesn't come from an external source, it lives inside the Sentry. It is him. So Robert Reynolds gained his powers through an experimental super soldier serum, but what should have made him a savior also fractured his mind. The Void emerged as a manifestation of everything Robert suppressed: his guilt, self-hatred, fear, and trauma, given horrific, tangible form. And the darker Sentry's thoughts become, the stronger the Void gets, and the Sentry cannot exist without the Void, and vice versa. Visually, the Void is often depicted as a shifting, inky black mass with tendrils and glowing eyes. It's capable of shape-shifting, telepathy, fear manipulation, and mass destruction. And in the Siege storyline, the Void fully takes over and kills Ares, nearly defeats Thor, and comes closer to tearing the world apart. The Void speaks to Robert, whispers in his mind, mocks his heroism, and constantly tempts him to lose control. And the more Robert tries to be good, the more the Void waits to twist that goodness into devastation. Some stories even hint that the Void could be connected to larger cosmic forces like Null, tying it into the very fabric of Marvel's universe-spanning darkness. In short, the Void isn't just the Sentry's enemy, it's the version of himself he fears the most. And as long as the Sentry lives, the Void will always be there, lurking just beneath the surface. Iron Man 2020. Real name Arno Stark is one of the most morally complex and authoritarian versions of Iron Man in Marvel's multiverse. Arno Stark was originally portrayed as a future descendant of Tony Stark, but in modern continuity, especially in the Iron Man 2020 event, he's reimagined as Tony's long-lost brother, born a genius, raised in secret, and ultimately corrupted by a dangerous blend of paranoia, entitlement, and utopian obsession. Arno was genetically engineered by Howard and Maria Stark to be the perfect son, meant to inherit the Stark legacy. However, he was born with a terminal illness that confined him to life support. For years, Tony never knew of his existence, and when they eventually met, Arno was brilliant, charming, and convinced he could reshape the world better than Tony ever had. And after Tony's apparent death, or digital reconstruction depending on the arc, Arno assumes the mantle of Iron Man, not as a hero, but as a techno-messianic authoritarian. With glowing gear-shaped pauldrons and a more aggressive, industrial Iron Man suit, he launches an initiative to impose peace by controlling AI through the Extinction Entity protocols, convinced that an incoming threat from a machine-based cosmic force must be preemptively neutralized. He becomes the face of robot oppression, suppressing AI rights and attempting to force all synthetic life under human control. In Iron Man 2020, Arno clashes with an entire rebellion of sentient robots and AI beings, led by Machine Man X-51 and eventually Tony himself, who returns in a new digital form. Arno believes he's saving the world, but in truth, he's being driven by delusion. His visions of the Extinction Entity turn out to be hallucinations created by his deteriorating condition. His crusade for control was never about protection, it was about fear. Arno Stark as Iron Man 2020 represents the dark side of futurism, a belief that progress requires domination, the fear of obsolescence, that he must outdo Tony or be forgotten, and the illusion of control. that the world can be fixed with enough tech and force. He's not a villain, he's more of a tragic mirror to Tony Stark. Where Tony's arc has always been about overcoming his flaws, Arno never gets the chance. He tries to build a perfect world and loses himself to the machinery he thought he could master. Zombie Spider-Man. In Earth 2149, also known as the Marvel Zombies universe, Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, succumbs to the zombie virus. So the Marvel Zombies saga created by Robert Kirkman and Sean Phillips begins with a mysterious virus that infects Earth's mightiest heroes, turning them into undead monsters, driven by an insatiable hunger for flesh. But this virus doesn't strip away intelligence or memory. The infected heroes still know who they are, they just can't stop themselves from killing and eating everyone around them. And when Peter is infected, he initially tries to resist the hunger, clinging to his morality and love for Aunt May and Mary Jane. But the hunger is overpowering. In one of the most horrifying and shocking moments in the series, Peter devours both Aunt May and MJ and is immediately consumed by guilt. Unlike many of the other zombies who embrace their monstrous urges, zombie Spider-Man is tormented by what he's done. And despite his rotten body, Spider-Man retains all of his agility and strength, wall-crawling abilities, web-shooting skills, genius intellect, but now they're paired with horrific damage, exposed flesh, and a decaying moral compass. As the series progresses, zombie Spider-Man becomes one of the few infected who starts to regain some emotional control, wrestling with his actions and trying to reassert his heroic identity, though the damage is already done. As the series continues and more infected heroes feed and evolve, Peter's remorse becomes a narrative anchor. Even in his corrupted state, he shows glimmers of the hero he once was, rescuing survivors, pushing back against the worst atrocities, and even trying to destroy the virus before it spreads further. In later arcs like Marvel Zombies Return, he attempts to warn other timelines to stop the apocalypse before it begins again. And in doing so, zombie Spider-Man becomes one of the only infected who truly seeks redemption, not as a hero trying to save others, but as a monster trying to stop himself. Zombie Spider-Man is a terrifying idea, not because he's the strongest zombie out there, but because he's the most human. Goblin Queen. Also known as Madeline Pryor, she is a woman born as a copy, manipulated into villainy, created from the genetic material of Jean Grey, and then becomes the Goblin Queen, a dark sorceress who unleashes hell literally on Earth. Madeline was introduced in Uncanny X-Men 168 back in 1983. At first, she seemed to be an ordinary human woman who fell in love with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, shortly after Jean Grey's apparent death. They married and had a child, Nathan Summers, who would grow up to become Cable. But what neither of them knew was that Madeline wasn't just a lookalike. She was a clone of Jean, created by Mr. Sinister as part of a twisted plan to breed a powerful mutant heir. And when Jean Grey returned from the dead, Cyclops abandoned Madeline and their son, triggering her spiral into despair and rage. Feeling rejected, irrelevant, and robbed of her identity, Madeline became vulnerable to dark forces, specifically the demon Nastor, who offered her the power to take revenge on the world that had discarded her. She accepted, transforming into the Goblin Queen with vast magical abilities and a deep connection to Limbo, a hellish dimension ruled by demonic forces. As the Goblin Queen, Madeline launched the infamous Inferno event, in which she unleashed demonic hordes onto New York City, causing reality to wrap, buildings to come alive, and civilians to turn into monsters, sought to sacrifice her own son, believing it would give her ultimate power and allow her to sever her ties to Jean Grey permanently, and battled the X-Men and X-Factor. Though she ultimately died in Inferno, Madeline's story didn't end there. She was resurrected multiple times, often returning as a vengeful and unstable force, still wrestling with the fact that she was created, not born, and that her existence has always been defined by someone else's shadow. The Goblin Queen wields a combination of powerful sorcery, enhanced by demonic pacts, psionic abilities, inherited from her origin as Jean Grey clone, and manipulation and seduction, often turning others to her side, especially in the demon realm. Unlike many evil versions of heroes, she didn't choose the darkness right away. It found her, exploited her pain, and transformed her into something terrifying. In more recent stories like Hell Lions and Dark Web, Marvel has revisited Madeline with more nuance, presenting her not just as a villain, but as a broken, tragic anti-hero, still trying to find her place in a world that was never meant to include her. The Hulk from Old Man Logan. In the dystopian wasteland of Old Man Logan by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven, the Hulk is no longer a hero, or even a man. He's become a grotesque, tyrannical monster, twisted by isolation, radiation, and madness into a force of absolute terror. And this version of Bruce Banner is one of the most disturbing depictions of the Hulk ever created. So in this universe, decades after the villains banded together and wiped out Earth's superheroes in a coordinated massacre, the United States has been carved up into territories ruled by supervillain warlords. One of the most feared is the Hulk Gang, a brutal clan of gamma-powered, inbred monsters descended from Bruce Banner himself, and ruling over them from what used to be California is Hulk, a senile, savage, and cannibalistic patriarch now utterly corrupted. Unlike the classic Hulk, who struggles with morality and control, this Hulk embraced his darker impulses. He grew bitter in the post-hero world, resentful of humanity, and chose isolation and domination over redemption. With no heroes left to hold him accountable, Banner became a backwoods tyrant. Even worse, he fathered his entire gang with his cousin Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, resulting in a clan of incestuous, redneck Hulks who terrorize anyone crossing their path. This Hulk is insanely strong, even by Hulk standards, strong enough to eat people whole and survive being ripped open. He's completely unhinged, having long since lost his moral compass and sanity, and he is driven by dominance, demanding tribute from the people in his territory and ruling through fear and brutality. And when Logan, now a pacifist farmer, fails to pay rent to the Hulk gang, they slaughter his wife and children, and this forces Logan to break his vow of non-violence and embark on a vengeful road trip across America. Eventually he confronts Hulk himself. After Logan kills most of the gang, Hulk eats him alive, but Logan survives, bursts out of Hulk's stomach in one of the most iconic and savage scenes in modern Marvel comics, and finally ends the monster's reign once and for all. This Hulk is not possessed, mind-controlled, or corrupted by some external force. He simply gave in. He let go of his humanity, gave up on the world, and became the very thing he once fought against. Iron Inquisitor. On Earth 4111, Howard Stark was the founder of Stark Industries, a man responsible for unimaginable technological progress and the original architect of S.H.I.E.L.D., helping to save the world countless times. But despite everything he had accomplished, Howard couldn't bear the fact that the true age of heroes, the future he envisioned, would arrive after his time. His legacy would live on, yes, but he wouldn't be there to witness it. So like many brilliant men in Marvel's darker corners, Howard made a choice. He struck a deal with Mephisto, and the price was his own son, sacrificing his own blood in exchange for immortality. He would live long enough to witness the heroic age, but in doing so, he forfeited his company, his fortune, and his humanity. From that moment forward, Howard became the Iron Inquisitor, a damned soul in iron armor, enslaved to the Council of Red, a multiversal alliance of Mephistos who manipulate timelines and realities. Howard, now stripped of his name and purpose, served them as their armorer, creating weaponry and armor in the depths of Mephisto's realm. As Iron Inquisitor, Howard was eventually assigned to Earth 616 Mephisto, aiding him in the effort to destroy this universe's Tony Stark. But when that Mephisto was destroyed by Moon Knight, the Devil returned and Howard continued to serve him. Together, they began amassing power through soul collection and dark sorcery, claiming debts from those who had made deals with Mephisto by devouring their bodies and souls. Howard's power as the Iron Inquisitor is deeply tied to both magic and technology. His Mephisto-forged armor grants him immortality and is equipped with advanced weaponry capable of tracking targets through the time stream, including homing missiles designed for cross-temporal warfare. So basically, the Iron Inquisitor is Howard Stark twisted by ego and envy, a man who sacrificed everything for immortality and legacy and lost both. And instead of shaping the future, he became a weapon. He doesn't fight for redemption, he doesn't seek absolution, he serves hell because he chose to. Doctor Strange Supreme. He is probably the darkest and most powerful version of Doctor Strange ever shown in the Marvel multiverse. Introduced in Marvel's What If animated series, this variant comes from a timeline where Stephen Strange's tragedy wasn't his hands, but the death of Christine Palmer, the woman he loved. And in trying to reverse that tragedy, he sacrifices everything: morality, reason, and eventually the universe itself. So in this reality, Strange's life takes a darker turn after Christine dies in a car crash. Unlike the main timeline, where he loses his hands and becomes the Sorcerer Supreme through spiritual growth, this Strange becomes obsessed with reversing Christine's death, believing he can use the mystic arts to rewrite fate. And when Wong and the Ancient One warn him that her death is an absolute point in time, something that must happen, he refuses to accept it. He turns to forbidden knowledge, splitting himself in two through time manipulation. One version tries to move on, while the other, darker version, aka Strange Supreme, descends into obsession. To gain the power necessary to defy fate, Strange Supreme begins absorbing magical beings, one by one, dragons, demons, and other creatures from across the multiverse. Each one adds to his strength, but slowly corrupts his body and soul. His physical form mutates, his appearance becomes monstrous, and his humanity erodes, until only a shadow of Stephen Strange remains. But he succeeds. He becomes powerful enough to bring Christine back. And that's when it all unravels. By reversing an absolute point in time, Strange Supreme fractures his own universe. Reality collapses, collapses, collapsing in on itself like a dying star. Christine, horrified by what he has become, disintegrates in his arms. Strange Supreme is left alone in a tiny crystalline prison of his own making, a pocket universe of guilt, madness, and cosmic punishment. And what makes Strange Supreme so tragic is that his intentions were pure, but his inability to accept grief turned him into a villain. And unlike other dark variants, he doesn't become evil for power or control, he becomes evil out of heartbreak, and in doing so, he becomes one of the most powerful and dangerous beings in the multiverse.